Back once again with Erika Brown, the publisher and editor of The Cricket, telling us about all things Manchester by the Sea and Essex. How are you, Erika?
Hey guys, how are you?
Great.
Good, good.
Heather, we missed you last week.
I know. I'm sorry. I had to skip out. I had to meet Ethan Foreman from the Gloucester Times, but we'll just be late for him today.
Yeah, no, we'll be okay.
Let's get going.
Yeah. So, Erika, there is a lot going on, right? I think right off the top, we want to talk about the housing choice topic.
Yeah, just because it's getting a lot of chatter and we will be covering it in the next couple of weeks. It's not in the paper right now, but it's definitely, I've got a lot of calls about it. That's actually why I wanted to bring it up. There's a lot of chatter about this new multifamily housing mandated zone for downtowns for towns that are serviced by the MBTA. I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but it affects all of us on Cape Ann, right? Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Yes, this comes down from the governor, right?
It comes down from the governor, and it actually stems from something we've talked about several times in the last year and a half. And it's called the Housing Choice Bill, which was voted in January. It went through the House and Senate in January 2021. So it's a year ago, right? But here we're experiencing the impact on the other side of the year because parts of it are now happening. So housing choice, just so if anybody doesn't remember it, you remember housing choice. It was a very comprehensive reform. It was a comprehensive reform that really made the changing of housing zoning easier for communities across the state. One of the biggest things it did, and this is what we talked about a lot, is it took things that used to take a supermajority, a 2/3 or larger vote at a town meeting. It actually lessened the threshold and made it much easier to pass zoning bylaws at town meeting to a simple majority, anything over 50%. That was a big change. And it's where most of the attention went. But there's another part of it that actually is coming down now, and that is the other part of housing choice, which was basically allowing people to live in the communities that they choose to and not be priced out of their communities. A lot of the answer from the governor's office was to really lean into public transportation. And public transportation means the commuter rail. Now, this is something that's been going on from my observation for quite a long time. When I tell people to think about it, I talk to them about the parking structure that was built at Beverly train station, at the Beverly commuter rail station. Remember that? And Salem? Those two moves, those two parking garages had a massive impact on the community that surrounded those train stations. Suddenly Rantoul Street is like, so it makes it easier to live and walk and live in these places. That accommodates older people, it accommodates younger people because it's apartments and higher density living. Well now, and here's what happened this year. What happened in the last couple of weeks is that the governor's office put out guidelines for what it calls the commuter rail sort of multifamily districts. That means 175 towns in the Commonwealth, 175 of them that are served by the MBTA, the commuter rail, or around the commuter rail, now will have to create a zone within a half a mile of the train station that will provide, as a matter of right, multifamily housing. And that's a big change. It's a big change for many communities. And here's the rule of thumb. For 1 acre, you'd be allowed to build 15 units. Now that is what's getting everybody kind of up in a tizzy because it sounds very dramatic. The truth is, in Manchester, right across the street from the train station, we have a housing development that was done by the town 20 years ago, and it's 40 units, I believe, on 2 acres. And nobody notices it because it's designed well and it integrates well into the downtown. So it's not as scary as all that. However, here's the other reason why it's not scary. Because most older communities, like Manchester is a great example of this. We have so much in the village that's non-conforming. You already have lots that are dense. They're not going to be as impacted. This community is not going to be as impacted as you think at all. So things like Rockport might be. Rockport is on the list.
Yeah. No, I think that Rockport, the dense village is a little bit away from the train station. That's why it would be noticeable, right? But there's already a pretty large 40B going in close to the train station, and that will certainly accommodate some of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Gloucester might be impacted because suddenly around the Stop and Shop area
exactly.
might be, or the Azorian, that might suddenly become a different kind of neighborhood.
Right.
Who knows? One thing I found interesting is that Essex doesn't have a train station.
Not anymore. Way back in the day.
But guess what? Yes, exactly. They had 3 of them.
Yeah.
We know that from history. But no, seriously, they are actually on the list of 175 towns. And I thought, why is that? And they're called MBTA adjacent. And the reason why, and this is the justification, I had to look up what MBTA adjacent meant, other than the fact that they're next door to, which isn't really, you have to have a network bus service and they count CADA.
Yeah.
CADA services Essex through a loophole. I don't think Essex pays for it, but it gets serviced through some sort of arrangement. So
Okay,
there,
I would say, being a parent trying to drive a child to a train station, Essex is not MBTA adjacent. I felt like I had to drive a very long way across that town to get to Ipswich to catch that train for my kid. So that's interesting.
Well, it'll be interesting, and Essex is going through its own kind of planning for its own bylaws and zoning that it's going to do. It has a stop clock of a year from May to finish it up. It's well on its way. It's doing a great job. I guarantee they factor this in. But here's the bottom line. This isn't something that's happening now. What this is the governor has released language for the towns that are impacted, and it's given it a full year to come up with its own version of this. And they're going to have public hearings. Our BOS is going to take it up in the next several weeks, which is when we're going to start to cover it. And it'll be really interesting. There's going to be public input. There's going to be a whole process. And here's the bottom line is, even though this is you shall do it, which is always that language, right? And it's a mandate. It doesn't mean that the town needs to do something that is compliant with this. And I should be very careful the way I say this, because I do believe this is one of those things that if you don't do it as a municipality, you give up a tremendous amount of goodies from the state. This isn't something where, every town has to put in zoning that's going to be 15 units per acre. It's just got to have a plan for it. That's if that makes sense. And we'll get into it later. But there you go.
There will be gifts. There will be gifts.
Yeah,
but
urgent.
You made a really interesting point earlier, Erika, where a seaside town, to accommodate that radius, a half-mile radius around the train station, what if it's water? So then what do you do, right? Do you just start moving back from that radius? Really interesting.
There are a lot of unanswered questions. And I talked to Chris Olney about this week, and he's really just he's great. He's on the planning board and he's on the Affordable Housing Trust. He just really knows his stuff because this is what he does for a living. And he said that the language is not quite firmed up. There's a little work that needs to be and he brought that up as an example. He said, for instance, coastal towns, 180 degrees of that radius for Manchester, based on our train station, is in the water. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to turn into Seattle and have harbor living?
Right.
Yes, there are things that need to be worked out, but there you have it. It's interesting stuff. Who would have thought zoning was?
I know, right? And I am getting more and more fascinated by these choices. So
I told you the planning board's where it's at.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
And Erika, you wanted to touch upon the water task force.
Well, it's not the water task force, although what I want to do is I want to touch on the fact that there's going to be a theme this year on water, because water is like one of those things that gets referred to, the water supply gets referred to like a lot, as if the water supply, the water infrastructure, water and sewer. I'm like, no. But anyway, so we knew that going into, the end of the year. And so our first thing was kind of interesting. We said, you know what, let's learn about the water supply. So we're going to be doing that for a long time this year. And we started off, Anita Brewer-Silgerhorn is a local resident in Manchester, grew up here, and she has done an amazing part 1 of 2 parts on the history of the water supply in Manchester. And the planning of it started in the late 1800s, 1889 or so, 1888, 1889, around the creation of something called, and I'm not as familiar with a standpipe. Have you heard of a standpipe?
No.
Okay,
No.
good. Okay, a standpipe is a water tower. It's an early water tower. It's a
Oh,
gravity-fed tower that, feeds things. And you see them on top of buildings like in New York City and things like that in the old village.
Right.
But anyway, it's a gravity-fed public water supply, and it works with a pump and a well and all this sort of thing. And we had a very, very impressive standpipe that was built. It had a capacity, one of the biggest in the United States, of 500,000 gallons of water. It was the first public water supply. It was made, the foundation of which, 36 feet in diameter, was made with Rockport granite, of course. And the story of it, they brought over masons from Italy and all sorts of things. And it was really, really impressive. And it was on top of Powder House Hill, which everybody knows now is a public park. And the story of it is actually kind of interesting. It's a little wonky, but interesting. And wonky as in terms of nerdy, not in terms of, it reads wonky. It actually reads really well. And she tells the story of it, and it's fantastic. And it ends, by the way, next week. It ends with, they had a water celebration in 1892. It was a big parade, bunting, floats, everything, the whole shebang, all to celebrate public, free, clean water. And you want to know who was like one of the princesses, Miss Water? Miss Water, 1892.
You say it,
that?
Erica.
Yeah.
Agnes Booth.
That's right. I remember.
way.
Yeah, I heard you. Oh, yeah.
From the famed Booth
Wow.
family.
Yeah.
Right.
Julius Booth's widow, and because she was a widow, I think by then, and she was the Sandra Bullock of her day, right, Corey?
Yeah. Over at the
Isn't that
mascot.
how you say it? She was beautiful. She was a famous actress, and she ran the Masconoma Hotel that Corey wrote all about, and her former brother-in-law was...
The Booth.
Yes, John Wilkes Booth. He killed the president of the United States.
Bad man. Yeah.
That family, man, they've got legs, right?
Miss Water.
So wait, is there any remnant of this tower on Powder House Hill left?
That was a whole trigger for her writing the entire piece and doing all this exhaustive research on it. She happened to be going for a walk. She happened to see it under all this debris. She thought it was beautiful. And she said, why on earth don't people know about this? She found out about it. She looked into the archives. She went into the archives of museums, the Manchester Cricket, all sorts of things. And she found a great story.
That is a great story.
Awesome stuff.
There you
That
go.
Manchester Cricket, yeah.
Lastly, Erica, you have some cool photos in this week's edition.
Yeah, they're cool. They're cool only to see what's going on. I mean, there's been a lot of plans for work in Essex for a long time. I remember 2 years ago, they've been wanting to fix the walls at Canoma Point. Fixing the walls at Canoma Point, yay. And then also the causeway work, they're sort of replacing the footprint. And that's kind of a big project they've been doing, and that's been going on. So good on you, Essex.
Yeah.
Right.
Get the cricket, folks. Heather and I get the cricket, shouldn't you?
Every
Thanks
week.
for your time, Erica. I'll see you next week.
All righty, bye.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.